So we don't prepare separate financial statements, we don't issue separate financial statements. When we send our reports into the state, we send in a little certificate that says that their financial reports are part of a parent entity. And so you wouldn't be able to go out on the state website and find a separate set of financial statements for the RDA. You just find those within the book that we do for the, I gotta show that off after all the work, So the book that we do for the city. And I think I threw that out in the Dropbox earlier today, so you guys can look at it for a second if you want. But anyway, the main slide to show, and then, I have a balance sheet for the whole RDA. I have an income statement here for the whole RDA. The main one that's good to show briefly is this one of fund balance. And so that's basically the reserves. And if you look at the statement here, balance sheet, you see total reserves, but you don't know how that's broken out between the different project areas. And really, as a council and mayor and Alex as the city manager, it's more important for you, and maybe even Chad while he's here, right, to understand where we're at with each of these project areas. So at the end of 2022, we had 3.4 million in the RDA, which is the project area, South Main Street, over by the train station and all that, that area, right? Winco, in that area. And the change in the fund balance in that area, so revenues minus expenses, we went up 844,000, 4,299,000 in that project area. Almost 900,000 of that has to be used for affordable housing. And the Caves Creek apartment complex gets a little small piece of that. It's under 20,000 a year, I think, based on the agreement with them. Yeah.
Who defines affordable housing?
What's that?
Who
defines it? Well, whatever definition is being used, then that's where it has to go.
So we just put money there, not knowing what the hell's coming out.
We have to reserve a certain amount of the money that comes into this area. The definition, I think, is changing. It can change based on what the legislature says it is.
But we put money there because we're told.
We're required to. Right.
Okay.
We have a very small amount that we've called non-spendable related to another commitment that we have. So then I also wanted to point out that, this says we have 4.3 minus 9, but we have future commitments on this money of 3.9. And so the way I presented it makes it look like we're a little bit overcommitted, but we're just overcommitted on what we already have in our pocket, right? This project area isn't going to expire until 2029, and we get about 780,000 a year back into this. So we're definitely not overcommitted on what our future tax increment revenue will be. I only presented it that way so that you wouldn't get the impression that, we're sitting on this mountain of money and we have no commitments. We do have some commitments out there in that project area. The same with the EDA. We had 3.9 million in reserve, and we have about 3 million in commitments currently. Some of that, the grading and things that are going up there, by the East Gate. We've talked about those projects. And so those are part of the commitments that are up there. But we're also generating $1.3 million annually in tax increment to help support these commitments and any other future commitments until 2035. And it's my understanding the tech committee just talked about that yesterday and moved it to 2035.
Yes.
And so then the CDA, which is over where RC Willie is at, I didn't put any future commitment in there because basically and it's kind of in a little footnote here, basically whatever they bring in, which is around 148,000 a year right now, that's committed to go back out. And so this reserve balance is technically not going to ever grow very much in this project area because of the arrangements that's there. Now that arrangement's only out through 2026, so it's not out there very far. Are there any questions about
the Young Automotive Group? There.
Yeah, so part of this here is Young headquarters and Young Kia. That's the bulk of that. And yeah, that's the bulk of that. And the bulk of this is the grading and stuff that JL Ventures is doing And also the JO Ventures property where Janicki's at, there was a previous commitment.
And Keomac. Keomac's got it. Keomac's got a chunk of that as well.
Keomac, that's what it is, I'm sorry, Keomac. Any questions about the RDA and kind of where we're at? Great, that's all I have on that.
Okay,
That's it?
okay.
Yep.
Do they have to take action?
Sorry?
Do they have to take any action? No action?
Not really.
Okay.
It's not a
We
separate,
approved that.
it's not a
with the budget,
separate
right?
financial report, and
Okay.
so you don't have to take any action on it.
Great.
And I may have miscommunicated
That's okay.
that. Sorry.
It's a good update, we can kind of see it all together too. I don't think we've had that before where we understand all the funds where they're at, so thank you, that was a good update. Okay, any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our RDA meeting, or our regional. Yeah, our RDA meeting, sorry.
Mayor, we thought about it. Maybe
Oh,
a
excuse me.
check.
Okay,
Some of
yes.
you were here on
I
the
totally
check.
forgot about that.
Just talk, explain where we go from here. So Chad, you want to get each people?
Yeah, I'll be very brief, but yeah, the good news is that yesterday, as was alluded to, we had our taxing entity committee meeting. That's required by state law because of when this economic development area was created. So we did have that meeting. That meeting includes representatives of the school district, the county, the city, the special districts. So we have a representative of all the special districts, including Weaver Basin, the Mosquito Abatement District, et cetera. So all those representatives came together. You're aware of the recent vote by the school board to extend their participation in the area until 2035. This vote by the taxing entity committee makes that official now. So that budget has been amended by the taxing entity committee. Next steps, though, there are a few things we still need to take care of. One is we do need to memorialize what the county did through an intergovernmental agreement. So that's being worked on. That's the next step. That'll go to the school board after the first of the year. After that, the RDA, the EDA, but the RDA functioning as the EDA, will hold a public hearing. We'll notify all the folks within that EDA boundary. They'll have a chance to come into the public hearing and comment if they wish, ask questions, whatever the case may be. And then the RDA, the EDA, will vote to extend or to amend that budget as well. So that's kind of the next steps in that process in terms of extending that tax increment collection area. Very exciting. The meeting was really, really a good meeting. We really appreciated those of you that joined. There were some good questions asked, but there was good support also from the taxing entities. This is one of those really, really strong economic development areas, so it's an easy one for us to talk about. That being said, there's a couple other things that are going to be happening in the near future up there that we'll be bringing back to the council for action as well in terms of property. So, any other questions? Thanks.
Okay, seeing that there's no questions, and thank you, Chad, for that reminder. We can go through and look for a motion to come out of our RDA and let's go into our regular work meeting.
So sad, I agree. Tired of saying let's adjourn and go into our regular meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and proceed then with our regular scheduled work meeting, which we have a few items here, but first off, we have any reports from the council. I always have reports.
CTC operates based off of data that comes from the SHARP survey, and that survey is administered every 2 years through the school districts, the schools that are willing to participate in it. So we got the most recent data, and I went to a meeting a couple of weeks ago down at the county building where Davis Behavioral Health sponsored this meeting, and they basically presented the results and presented it at a county level so that we could see how the county fares and how the county would be using this data. So we got a full packet of that information, but that's just good for us because we will actually have access to our local city data, which we normally have. Northridge and Layton are the two codes that we operate within, and so we'll get data down to those school levels and be able to kind of make sure that the programming we want to implement is still valid. And so for those of you who don't remember, don't know, CTC is focused on drug and alcohol prevention and suicide prevention in youth. And so the questions and responses in these types of surveys that go out through the schools help us to know what kind of trends are happening, are things getting better, are things getting worse, things of that nature. So one thing that I do remember vividly is that the alcohol use has gone way down. The things that they're a little more concerned about at this point are vaping, which is something that we know is happening. So I'm excited to see what the data says specific to our city and our students. But anyway, that data was presented. And then also Learning to Breathe. We have a couple of those classes starting, and they'll be actually offered here at the city building. I was talking with Carlene Kidman, who's over at Layton Youth Court, and they've put in an agreement to be able to offer, or not offer, but require all of the kids who go through that youth court program to attend this Learning to Breathe, which is a coping mechanism to kind of help kids with stress relief and things of that nature. And they thought it was a good partnership because a lot of the offenders were responding that the reasons they were doing the things they were doing was because of stress or because of depression, you know, these types of responses. And so they've been able to partner with the school district and with Davis Behavioral Health to offer these classes. And so that's for the youth, but some of their parents are coming to attend as well. And there also an adult class that's being offered, not in this building, but in the city. There's an adult class that's being offered as well. So those are just a couple of things that are happening with CTC. And yeah, I think that's all I'll say for now. But things are moving along well.
Well, I have to say, that's probably the best outcome we can expect from this, is the fact that we started the Communities That Cares, but knowing that they're working directly with the youth court and the offenders. And that's the whole purpose of the program, is to kind of really move it upstream there and hopefully change the habits at an earlier age. So, yeah, that's very good. Good. Anyone else?
Legislative affairs with the chamber met the last time of the year today, and Jerry Stevenson was with us and gave us his socks and underwear for Christmas speech. So he said, don't plan on the unprecedented funding that the state's had the last couple of years. Looking a lot more back to normal, I guess, pre-COVID. And Senator Milner was there also talking about education. Also all of the committees, the subcommittees that the chamber has. I serve on the environment and public utilities and transportation. I think you're on transportation, and I don't know what else, but anyway, all of this, the health and human services. We finalized all the priority documents for going into the legislative session. So Davis County's in good hands, I think, legislatively. We've always had good representation. Getting exciting.
Like we've said before, the document, once they start doing the deal tracker and showing their priorities, that goes a long way. It goes hand in glove with what the league does, so, and the fact that it really kind of lets the legislatures know where everybody stands. In particular, this is good when we join with NUG, which is all of northern Utah, and we collectively put our priorities together, then we can have the legislature understand what all of us think collectively and not just one Davis County. So that helps a lot. Speaking of that, I guess we got to figure out too if we're gonna set up our meeting with a pre-meeting, pre-legislative meeting that we've done in the past. I know Drake, I think they did it down in Bountiful, but we've done it here.
Yeah.
I called you Drake because I say Clint, you know.
I've been called much worse.
So that's something we need to look at.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good reminder, maybe there's any of those priorities that were talked about that we would want to reemphasize as a city. I'm not suggesting there are, but hopefully there's some congruency there in alignment.
Yeah, I can look at, I was gonna say it's,
One thing Jerry, I can't remember if it was Jerry or, oh shoot, who's the planner for Davis County?
Jeff Euler.
Jeff, no, not Jeff.
No, it was,
No, I'm thinking-
Kent Anderson.
Kent
Kent
Anderson,
Anderson.
okay, he's over transportation. They kind of talked about how Davis County has got a lot of money for transportation projects over the last several years, and probably plan on seeing some of that big money projects, or the big money go south to, probably into Utah County. They've got some issues to deal with transportation. But priorities, I think they're already on, like 89, 84 interchange. I think that's already planned, so it's, it was one of our priorities, but water was talked a lot about, obviously. Yeah, not a lot of changes, though, so. If I can get, if we've got some specific priorities, talk to the mayor.
Okay.
We can cover in that meeting.
Mike, just a quick update on the Utopia. We have a meeting coming up, and I was reviewing the packet, and I noticed that in the last 4 years, the take rate for Layton has gone from about 20% to over 40%. So that's a huge increase. We almost have almost 10,000 total subscribers. It's continuing to go up. So it's just, I had a couple people ask me a question about what during the election, just how's Utopia? It was interesting to have a conversation about someone who had an idea about what Utopia was.
What it
And
was.
not what it is. And it's just been nice to be able to present good news that it's doing well, particularly in Layton, but they've expanded to Bozeman and Idaho Falls and a couple other places. So I'll learn more a little bit about some of the financials because I was reviewing those and I have some questions, but when that meeting comes up, I'll circle back around.
So I'm curious, and I don't know if it came out in your meeting, knowing that there's this negative advertising that's going on the television, are they seeing any, I mean, they probably wouldn't see the ramifications of it yet because it's still fairly new, but who's driving that? Is it all the other purveyors, or is it one in particular? Do you guys know?
I don't know, the ads have changed recently. I was aware of it
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, and it was nondescript. It was basically, didn't name names, i.e. Utopia just named
Yeah, right.
anything when touched by political people.
Or
was all
government.
Obviously, yeah, poor government corrupt. It was all the wasteful, but Roger reached out to myself and Wayne Pyle in a text and said, have you guys seen this? And I actually hadn't seen it up to that point, but he said that we're trying to find out who it was coming from, whether it was a local thing. His perception was that while there may be local interests that supported it, that it was a national, being orchestrated at a national level.
Yeah.
And then just yesterday, in fact, it was the first time I heard from some other city managers down in West Valley that they were naming Utopia specifically. So I don't know if it's a national group that is
Changed.
identifying by region or by area, by state, those specific interests. But we have there's board meetings coming up, and I'm sure we'll get a report on that. But earlier Roger, I asked him, again, this has been a few weeks ago, if he thought that this would have a detrimental effect on the progress, and at that point in time, he didn't think so. I did also hear today, that this group has hired one of our former state legislative people as their spokesman. Which is great
It starts
news.
with, I was gonna say, GH?
Yeah, so that was an interesting
That is.
twist, and so we're gonna reach out. We haven't had relationships with him in terms of legislatively, but some of the other large cities in Utopia have, so there's gonna be a discussion about why and what's going on, and try to gain some insight there. So
Is that spokesperson or is that and/or lobbyist?
I think, I'm assuming but that was a new wrinkle that they just became aware of, so it'd be interesting to find out what the
Yeah, he was on the news, not the news.
No,
His commercial was on last night.
He does, and I don't know if you guys listen to Lean Man Wednesday. He always picks up on that too and really kind of gets into the whole political field on what's happening. It's on the radio. Well, you know, I just gotta say, I'm glad that we're doing what we're doing. I know from the projections, when we kind of decided to go, you know, back up the bond, we thought the take rate, most we'd see was 32%. So the fact we're up to 40 is fantastic, right? So I mean, I'm glad to see that continue to increase.
We don't, Utopia doesn't think of UIH for them per se, and, you know, we're not comfortable in our shoes per se in terms of resting on our laurels and everything.
Right.
But historically, these kind of issues have not, these kind of attempts, in the early days when there was, you could point to some challenges, there was some traction given, but Utopia is the most popular internet service provider in the state. And by large margins. And so I think the narrative from the anti-government involvement folks has kind of played itself out. This may be an effort to re-energize that, but I think what we've seen with the take rates is that at the local level, at the family level, where people are actually choosing, that philosophical thing has pretty well played itself out already through the take rates that exist. And if you have that anti-government bent, for example, about anything, you've already made that decision and you're not going with Utopia. But there are a lot of people are, and you know all those facts. They already know all those facts, who Utopia is and what it provides. They also had experience with the incumbents, and they're intentionally choosing to have a choice, right? To not be locked into a proprietary model. So, yeah, we'll be wise and we'll respond, and I'm sure they'll have some advertising around it and so forth aggressively, but we don't think historically there hasn't been an ability for these kind of things to pull much away, because those folks have already decided we're staying away, and this is not gonna change.
Yeah, I agree, and it's not just the take rate, it's the churn rate, and it's always minuscule. I mean, you don't see fluctuations because people that get it are so satisfied that they don't go anywhere. So it's not a lot of, there's not a lot of wishy-washiness with that kind of.
Well, there's no games being played saying, hey, you get it today at a ridiculously low rate, but a year from now, I'm gonna increase it.
Right,
I mean,
well,
that's what it is.
and that, the competitors can come out and say, we're doing fiber, but they can call whatever they want, and maybe the products are similar, but the name in front of the fiber is still the name they don't like.
Yeah.
And so they're still like, yeah, I can get that, but why would I go with them? I've had all these terrible experiences, and so, yeah, I agree with what Alex said. I think it's a difficult, it's an old battle. It's kind of just like, that's kind of done and gone. That was a battle they tried to fight and maybe even had some ammunition way back when, but now I just don't think it's the same. So, good for us.
Yeah, no, it is, it's very good. Okay, anything else, Jess? Okay, let's go ahead then and go on to our financial and audit report for the year end again. Tracy, I'll turn the time back over to you.
Okay, so I have Rob Wood here with me tonight from HVME, the auditors that the council hired to audit the city. They've gone through, spent the last few months, not exclusively with us obviously, but over the last few months looked at various parts of our financial records and done their detailed audit of our financial statements and all of the controls and things behind that. And when I decide to stop talking, then I'll let him introduce all of that stuff to you. But briefly, we'll go through just some of the financial highlights for the city that come out of the annual comprehensive financial report. If we were to look at revenues, we can look here at actual revenues from one year to the next in these different categories. You can see that sales tax was up $874,000. There'll be a slide a little later that will show you how that compares to other years. That's actually only about a 3% increase from one year to the next. And so we can see that it's slowed, the increase slowed significantly, and then it's changed even a little more this fiscal year since July. Franchise tax, kind of steady, communication steady, energy tax actually up as I looked into that, and because I thought that's a, significant increase. Dominion Energy was kind of the culprit here, did a price increases the last 2 years. And so you may have noticed that your gas bill went up quite a bit the last couple of years. And I noticed on the news and in articles and things, there were a lot of people complaining about that. Here in our licenses permits, this involves a little more of an explanation. The state auditor's office has been pushing really hard on fees. And it's been a subject down at the legislature about cities and their fees. It's been in the news. Well, the one thing they forced us to do was to report our building permit and plan review fees in a separate fund. And you may remember that I came back mid-year or so, and we did a budget amendment to move some of this revenue out. So of this $1.8 million, about half of it is just moving revenue from the general fund to a special fund. It's called I called it building services. And along with that move of revenue, I also did an analysis and moved expenses out of the general fund as well, so that the general fund isn't affected a whole lot by this transition, but it does affect this line. Building permits, though, the other half of that amount, about 920,000 of it, is from the reduction in building permits. Interest rates go up, building permits have gone down. Chad has talked about that in several meetings, that we have all these lots available and nobody's building on them. So that's where that is, and that's the explanation of it.
So that 324 will be consistent now, because was that a recent legislative change?
The 324 could still change just based on what permits do.
But not
right?
that drastic, it's gonna be.
Yeah, not that drastic.
You have a new fund.
Right. So you could probably add 920,000 back to that, you'd be $1,250,000. So you went from 2.1 to $1,250,000.
Okay.
And so I would say that $1,250,000 is probably more of a consistent number you would see, just depending on what happens. In talking, I think even just over the summer, permits have probably come back up a bit.
Started to come back up a bit.
Yeah, this time last year, I remember making the comment that in December we had one.
Right.
So, I think we had more than one in the last few months, so.
Yeah. 5 or 6 in the last week, so.
Intergovernmental, these numbers normally aren't this big. We had 2 years of receiving, over $4 million from the federal government in both of those years that fell into this category. And some of our other category, with the ARPA funding, and some of the other funding just, was a little bit down as far as that goes. As fines and forfeitures, fine. Now the miscellaneous and sundry revenue, that's, becomes an interesting number. Why do we all of a sudden go up $2 million? Well, they raised interest rates, so that affected this number, building permits, but it also affected this number. So interest income in the general fund was up $1.8 million. That makes up a pretty good chunk of what we lost here. Actually, it's double what we lost here. And so I'm kind of, there's going to be a point when there's a transition, right? Where rates just, from what I'm reading, and you've probably heard this as well, rates ratchet up over a long time, and then the reserve will decide, we're done, and they'll drop them.
Well, didn't it
So-
just drop?
And they may have just,
They did to 6 point,
they may have just dropped, so I didn't hear that.
they just dropped, I know that.
But anyway, so, that's gonna affect things. We have a small amount, what I would call of our money that's not in the public treasurer investment fund, that we're trying to hedge that a little bit. It won't hedge the whole thing, get into some longer term CDs that will keep us at 5 to 5.5% on some of that money. The rest of it with the state pool tends to kind of fluctuate with whatever the market's doing. So, and that's the bulk of the money that we have is there. A couple other things to point out that affected the financial statements and also affected a finding that we had was that we had to come up with, the lease standard went into effect last year, but we had a renewed lease on the court building, and because of the way the standard's written, they required us to, in the initial year, record this giant revenue on our financial statements, which really wasn't money coming to us. It's just an accounting function, a paper transaction. And then we also had a new standard that came in where we now have to keep track of, gosh, now I just forgot the name of what they are. Subscription-based internet, information technology.
Agreements.
And so we have the new Spillman system that's going in, and we have a bunch of money put into that. And so that one met the threshold. We went through and did a big analysis of all of the subscription-based information technology arrangements we have. I just call them SPIDAs, right? Because that's the acronym. There's a big long name. And we went through and did an analysis of all of those. Ed happens to be here, works in my department. He and his crew put in a big effort to figure out all of the stuff we have out there. And then we had to go through and analyze it, and it came down to a handful of things that we needed to apply this standard. Long story, sorry, but those affected our financial statements, and the reason I talk about them is we ended up in a finding over them because it caused our police department, who rents the court, to go over budget, not in money they actually spent, but in a paper transaction and in an accounting transaction. So I want to be clear that the police department did not overspend their budget, but in the financial statements, this transaction makes it look that way to the state. Same with the subscriptions. The BNC Road revenue was up. I mean, for most of this fiscal year, gas prices were the highest they've been in a long time, so that explains that pretty easily, and the grant was in line with what it should be. I won't take the time to go through the budget to actual of this same revenue, but you'll have this presentation available so you can see it. The expenditure side of it, you can see that here in this line right here, that's police admin. And so you can see that it was $1.2 million over budget, but $1.4 million of that is related to these leases and subscriptions. So if you follow the line across, the police admin was actually under budget by $102,000, and their other areas were also under budget. So if you combine all that together, PD is actually under budget almost $200,000, right? You can see that most all of these areas were under budget in total, being, well, first I should back up. In total, the general fund was under budget 2.1, almost 2.2 million. Of that, you have this large amount that was wages. And, if you went down through these different categories of wages, parks, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. They had a very difficult time finding anyone to work, seasonal workers especially, in the parks department. Engineering, we've been short an assistant city engineer for 1.5 years, and then difficult when others have come and gone. There's been time lapses between as well. PD, the same story. Fire, the same story. And I forgot what the legal one was, but anyway. But it's all kind of the same thing. It's just a difficulty in getting, if someone leaves, we have a difficult time recruiting new people to come in. This one strange one that I'll just explain so you don't have to call me about it later is community development. And it looks like, they were way under budget. Really, there was a figure in here for the Hill Air Force Base study that probably shouldn't have been in this budget, but at the time, we were kind of in flux between completing that analysis that they did, the compatible use study. And so it makes it look like this is way out of line when really it's not. Yeah, Chad doesn't save that much money.
Chad was gonna come in and hey, that's what I did.
But overall, community development was also under budget. So, are there any questions on any of that to this point? So then if we look at the general fund and we talk about reserves, which is what we like to know where we're at. If we had revenue and expense, we had a spendable amount of fund balance at the end of 2022. We have some fluctuations between our restricted and assigned amounts. It gets us down to this estimate before the 2024 budget, which is also part of another finding that Rob will cover, 38% reserve. So we're 20,800,000. Well, of that, in the current budget year, 2024, we have committed just over $12 million. And so our ending unassigned, uncommitted fund balance in the general fund is 8.7 million, so that's 16.2%. 16.2%, honestly, is about where we'd like to be historically. That's, before all this fluctuation with COVID and everything, I bet 10 of the 12 years I was here before that that's about where we end up, between 16 and 20%, and it's a good place for us to be. What it demonstrates to the citizens, as a city council, is that you're not building this giant war chest. You are taking the money that they've given you and you're spending it on the things that we need, and you're not keeping, more than you need to in a reserve. In other words, overtaxing, right? Because you've got a larger reserve than is necessary. So that's where that's at. If we look at the individual enterprise funds, you can see that each of these, I start out with where was our net position at 22, where is it at 23? For water, we have a number of carryover projects and budgeted uses of fund balance in the current year. This pension adjustment is a whole big messy explanation thing, but it affected our reserves as well. And so then you look at where I would project, the unrestricted fund balance, 2024 would be about 11 million. The interesting one in this column is the charges for services. So for a couple of years, we talked about, because of the drought, how that number went down and down and down because people were conserving. And there's two things that affect this. One, maybe not quite so much conservation this past water season, and also the rate increase that was imposed to help ward off the fact that our revenues weren't going to keep up with our expenses. So the revenue change, charges for services up 2.1. In the storm fund, and we can walk through each of these, or we can just see kind of where they stand. But again, I'll send these out to you. The reserves up a little bit there, but we do have carryover projects, so at about 10 million. Sewer fund with the carryover projects that we have there at about 1.3. EMS, this one has this giant 3.6 million, and that has to do with the way, and I've talked about this in previous years. The year before, this number was a positive number. Now it's a negative number. And so it's, I don't know. I don't like it, but they force us to report it this way. What I'm trying to show is what I feel is, the approximate unrestricted fund balance or net position in this fund, about $1.2 million. We can look at revenues, strong in the EMS fund, increased significantly. And if we went into the details of the EMS fund, their write-offs did not increase as much as their revenue did. So that's, in the past, they've been kind of hand in hand. The revenues have gone up, but the write-downs, not necessarily write-offs, but insurance write-downs have kind of corresponded. This year, they weren't quite as much, so that was good news. If you look through the MD&A, the management's discussion and analysis in the report, I talk about that a little bit. Swimming pool fund, kind of just where it's been. We may end up a little short, so we got to watch that this year in 2024, just to make sure we don't end the year in a deficit position. And street lighting, we have carryover projects there sitting at about $1.2 million. The refuse fund with about $1 million sitting in that fund. Athletic with a healthy balance in there. And the UIA fund really doesn't change. There's some money that got put in there a few years back, and for now it's just been sitting there. Secondary water, really this secondary water is not the full system. This is just the contract we have with Weber Basin to manage their little piece of it. The other governmental funds that we have out there, I mentioned this building services fund that we moved $915,000 to. Here I'm looking at budget to actual, so the emergency dispatch, budget to actual was down a little bit. Yeah. And victim services, budget to actual was down. We actually amended that budget and then ended up with a small finding that Rob will talk about in state compliance for having a deficit fund balance there. The RDA we've discussed, the debt service fund, capital projects fund. Of course, that's big, and a lot of these projects are just still out there. It's not that they went away, we just didn't spend all the money that we put into those projects out there. Well, the ramp fund, the revenue in the ramp fund increased 168,000. This was the other side of the building services. The Prop 1 fund, oh, sorry, keep wanting to move that up on the screen a little bit. Prop 1 fund actually down a little bit in revenue, the transit fund.
Tracy, was the emergency dispatch different because the construction started later? Or do you know why that was?
Actually, this doesn't have anything to do with the construction yet. It's just the operational side of it. And I'll actually look into that one a little bit more. Finally, just a little bit of a sales tax review for you here at the end. So this is the 2023 sales tax. If we look at actual to actual, this was the 843 that I mentioned, 3.67% increase, about 3% ahead of budget in that year. If we look at the current year, right now we're down 178,000 compared to last year. It's about a 3% decrease. If we compare it to budget, then we're just off just slightly. In this chart, we can kind of see, I projected out, making an assumption that if we're down 3% now, that might be a consistent theory throughout the year. But we kind of, this goes back to what Councilman Roberts said about, the legislature saying don't get used to a bunch of money. That we had these giant increases over a couple of years, 19%, 15%, then we settled down. And it's probably a good thing, really, because what it kind of shows me is that maybe inflation has slowed down. Mm-hmm. I mean, we in no way added enough businesses to come anywhere near these increases. So I would say it was, and I've said that in the budget meetings, that it was inflationary. So in a way, I would call this a good thing, just because hopefully prices have quit going up. Now we'll come to the budget meetings here in a few months, and where we might still have a problem is wage pressure. So even though this side of the scale has maybe slowed down a little bit inflation-wise, your wage pressure might still be trying to keep up. We haven't analyzed that yet, and so we have that problem. That's my overview of where we're at. Good financial position with the 16% reserve. I'll turn some time over now to your auditor. He can go through his reports.
I don't need to cover much. Tracy's covered all the highlights on the findings, so I'll just kind of recap them real quick. But pleasure to be with you again tonight and work with the city in all capacities, all the departments that we get to bug and question and make sure that they fill the details of the audit and through inquiries and so forth. Really, as part of this, it's required by state code for you to undergo a full-blown audit. We have completed that process with management and here to report to you on council. So overall, there's 3 reports that we issue. The first one is an independent auditor's report that's found at the front of the book after you do your transmittal letter and some org charts and your certificate of excellence in financial reporting from the GFOA. That report is an unmodified opinion. It's the best opinion I, as an auditor in my firm, can give your organization. We also refer to it as a clean opinion. We don't feel there's any material misstatements. Now, we don't feel there's any material misstatements because management has corrected any and all discrepancies or errors that we noted as we conducted our audit. Obviously, an audit's involved in coordinating also with outside agencies, State Tax Commission, Davis County for property taxes. You get the confirmation of bank accounts, bonds. So we're working with outside agencies to say, what do you show that you've given Layton City? Then we compare that with what does the finance department show to make sure those line up. If there's discrepancies, we go in and reach it. I'm happy to report that we're giving you the best opinion we can give on an audit. The last 2 reports are found in the back of the book. The first one is on your financial controls over, your internal controls over financial reporting and also your compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, grant agreements, and so forth. Now that's not an opinion, it's just a report. Happy to report we didn't find any material weaknesses and we didn't find any significant deficiencies. at the city. So nothing that needs to be reported in a written format. We'll review stuff like what's your procedures over cash receipting, depositing, billing out to customers, approving vendors for payment, approving invoices and purchases, capitalization, journal entries, payroll transactions, approval of wages, and so forth. We didn't find any discrepancies in the way those processes and procedures are done. We feel you've got relatively good segregation of duties. Now, obviously, if you look at a perfect system, nobody can be perfect. It would just cost way too much to have perfect controls. So you say as long as the benefit doesn't outweigh the cost of doing it, then we'll go ahead and do it. Much like our audits are based on samples. The last report is required by the state auditor's office. It's the state compliance audit guide that they put out. Now there's a whole section that's, we have to test things every year, like your fund balance percentage that Tracy's talked about, your adopting of a budget, you're complying with what's the appropriated budget you've authorized compared to the actual. Now we've learned that we've had some overages in police department. We understand why, leasing of this building, so that's really just a paper entry. They really didn't spend more than you appropriated, a paper entry. In the last hour came up and bid them in handling this new SPITA and our lease standard that Tracy's talking about, that has talked about. The other one is also related to that debt service. So that building over there is not just a payment to the state, it's broken up into how much is principal, how much is interest. So we've separated that on the financial statement like you do for any lease or car loan or whatever that you want to do. The interest side of that has no budget associated with it, but had $74,799 worth of cost, if I remember right. So that was an overage because there's no budget with it. The other item we had, he's talked about the victim services. They received like a VOCA grant and they spend those grant funds. Well, they had some untimely timing of expenditures, I would say, that forced them to be over by just over like $4,600. 4673 or something. So really not material. When you look at the city and what it has in its financials, that's just insignificant, but that is a yes or no. It's not, hey, is it a gray area? I'd love to pass on it, but then the state can come back, why didn't you issue this as a finding? The last one that he pointed out when he was talking about what's our unassigned and assigned fund balances in the general fund, state wants that to be between 5 and 35% maximum. It used to be 25%. So that's why Trace said, hey, we used to be around 16, 20% because the max level used to be 25. When COVID came out, they raised it to 35 to allow cities to build up some coffers, especially since there were significant revenues. You had the CARE Act followed by 2 rounds of ARPA funding where agencies have received millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, Tracy talked about it back to back. $4+ million a year the last 2 years just with ARPA alone. That percentage, when you do the calculation of those two numbers together, the state wants you to compare that to your current year general fund revenues. That comes out to 37.98, or we'll say 38%. So you're slightly over, not by much. And he's already indicated you've already allocated for projects this fiscal year in taking care of taking that percentage back down to where it needs to be. So really, it's a ball game of playing, hey, where are we at with the revenues compared to our expenses? What do we need to do? But I'm going to say, if that's a finding that if you have to have a finding, that's the one you want, because it indicates, hey, we've got some extra funds to fund some projects that are out there. So those are my 3 reports. City's doing very well. Our pleasure to be with you, and I know we've given the city a thorough examination and hit up all the departments and making sure some of the financials. We had about 10 or so journal entries that we proposed. I know 3 of them had to relate with SPITA, those subscription-based IT agreements that Tracy talked about. He put some on the books, and as I went through terms and some of the contracts that Ed helped put together, we said, yeah, probably a little too aggressive. It's not really spelled out in the contract. If it's not spelled out in the contract, we don't just assume, hey, it's a 3-year contract or 5-year. You may be taking it that long, but if it's not specified in the contract, standards will say, what's the term? Just recognize based on what's in that contract. So if you're vague, or if you do them just a year or under, then we don't have to recognize them. Then it's just a standard, hey, make your payment, you're done. You don't have to throw it on as an intangible right to use asset and a subscription payable. Same goes with the lease, as an intangible right to use lease asset and a lease liability on that. We used to just have those with capital leases. Now all of our operating, now there is considered leases, doesn't matter, they're considered your financing in one way or the other. Whether you're gonna capital lease, you're gonna own. The opposite side on the right to use asset, you're not gonna own. Ownership doesn't transfer at the end. If it does, then it just becomes a finance lease. Any questions on this massive financial statement that we've produced over the last couple months? They're big. I mean, people wonder, it's like, hey, why are you so busy? And I said, this is why I'm busy. I'm doing like 7 of these.
Yeah, but how did you remember that 700,799?
He's a detailed guy.
No kidding.
No, to make a comment on that, Rob and his firm, been wonderful to work with, but you can feel, at least, I have felt, the audit experience for sure. And honestly, you can feel good that this firm has gone through, done a very, very detailed job. Also, your audit committee, the private members that you have on there, very experienced people, very detailed job of looking through the financials, making sure that, all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. But his firm also has brought a lot, we talked about these SPIDAs and leases. Because they have experience with all these other cities, it's beneficial to me and my staff to have their expertise, to be able to call them up, bounce ideas, work through some of these difficult standards that have a big effect on our financial statements. So I really appreciate, especially this year, it's been a good year. Got a little delayed because of all that stuff, but a good group to work with. But at the same time, even though we have a good working relationship, we still get audited. We're still feeling the pressure of making sure we're doing everything right, our controls are in place, so it's good.
It feels nice to sit here and don't take this too serious. I don't understand a lot of what you're saying, okay? But to hear from a separate audit saying that Tracy's doing his job, and Tracy, more power to you, because all the years I've been here with Layton City, that's one thing I remember we used to get plaques or something. Do they still do that?
You still get it.
They still do
You
that?
get the you
Because I was
apply for the
wondering
GFOA award every year, and I don't know how many years in a row you've received it, but any of my cities that have applied for it, any of my governments that choose to apply for it, have always received it.
I just wondered if you were starting to put pictures on it, because Trace kind of sharpened up tonight.
Okay. No, that's a good report. We appreciate all the hard work put into it.
It's good, and even the auditors, so like I am my firm gets audited every 3 years on financial audits that we do. So next Tuesday, I've got an auditor coming in from Wyoming to take a sample of like 10 to 12 of our audits to make sure we're following standards and procedures and planning and not just glossing over stuff, saying I did an audit, yet all I did was a compilation. But I've got entities, so I appreciate what management does here. I've got another entity that I just picked up last year. They missed a $6 million bond on the state that said, how do the auditors and management miss $6 million? Didn't get reported at all on the statement. So as Tracy said, we try and be very thorough in what we do.
Yeah, you guys have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we have one more item here on our work meeting, which is Chad's going to go over the rezone request for the Fulton Farm. Oh, whoa. If you do that, then we better say why we have it. You can grab it, just grab the whole tray. While he's setting up, let's, so typically we do our birthdays and not knowing what the agenda's looking like for close to Christmas, we figured we'd go ahead and be prepared for Tyson's birthday, and knowing that he's a...
Someone else request meat?
I was gonna say, knowing that he's the meat company man, that means you get to partake before we others.
You get the first
Thank
chili.
you.
But I agree. Jump into that. Resident?
I just found out he makes popcorn.
Thank you.
Okay,
Robert's popcorn.
proceed. Yeah, that's good.
Gotcha.
Happy birthday.
Did you get your jerky selections here? This is a revisit, actually.
birthday present.
Is that?
Thanks for having me.
On me.
This is a revisit of an application you looked at about a year ago. This is the Fulton Farms. It's up there on, just off of Valley View, just off of the Ward 89 interchange, the interchange up there. A little bit of a view of the property. Notably, the reason why this is back before you is that after you approved this application, the property owner to the south here decided they didn't want to participate anymore. So this is shrunk by about 7 acres. There used to be a connection out here to this roadway or a future connection that's not shown anymore. The applicant went back and retooled the development to try to comply with our PRD ordinance. It took quite a few iterations of that for that to happen. We were able to get a plan that does comply with the PRD ordinance though, after a lot of work with the applicant on that. Just again, as an idea of some of the surrounding constraints on the property, there's a big, well, first of all, a big Weaver Basin aqueduct that runs about through this area. Also a reservoir that's there on the south side of the property. One thing that we noted the first time around was there's a lot of property on this proposal that's undevelopable. That's just, it's over the maximum slope we allow development on. So this property meets the 12% open space, but that 12% is usable open space. There's a big chunk of this that's not developed that we just consider to not be usable. That's shown on this map right here. That's that cross-hatched area. That's all open space as well. We don't calculate that into the 12% because the new ordinance for the PRD says it has to be usable open space in that 12%. A couple things that are notable on the open space plan, there's a trail connection. We talked about that the first time around. It goes up into, eventually, to connect the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. You've got this roadway that approximately follows that alignment of that big aqueduct that runs through the property. Just the other changes that I'll just mention really quickly, the townhomes used to be down here on the south. They have moved those up to this area. The overall number of townhomes has been reduced proportionally to the reduction of the site. So you have 15 townhomes shown now. There's 36 single-family lots. The property is located within the sensitive lands overlay because of the steepness and some of the geologic issues. It's gone through, we went through a very thorough geologic investigation the first time around. We went through and revised that based on this new layout to make sure that each of these lots can actually be built on with the grading that needs to occur for each of those lots. Did you have a question, Dave?
Yeah, on the east end here, where you said they can't build or whatever,
Yes.
is that a road?
Yeah, there's a little kind of access road.
Is that
that
an
goes
old
through there.
dirt road type thing?
It's an easement access road that goes through there.
So it'll still be a, whatever it is,
Yeah, it'll stay exactly what
yeah.
Yes, this is, yeah. Wanted to mention one thing, that the applicant has, in the last couple of weeks, requested a slight change. We found that they had sent this request over via email that was stopped by our system, our email system didn't allow that through, so they did ask us if we could bring this up to the council. These are the elevations that were proposed. If you remember the PRUD, Planned Residential Unit Development, we require typical elevations for the building, so we know exactly what's going to be built up there. This is what was proposed and reviewed previously, and also these typical elevations. The applicant has requested that in lieu of those, that these elevations be considered and be included in their development agreement. We have reviewed those. We actually feel that some of those elevations represent a better design than some of the previous elevations. So staff is comfortable with these elevations. We recommend that you do include that as part of your motion, to include these new elevations as part of the development agreement. Now, just to understand how that works, these elevations will be the basis of our review of the preliminary plat that will then come through subsequent to this approval. This approval doesn't approve the subdivision, just approves the concept plan. So these will be used as a basis for review of that subsequent application. So we are comfortable with the development agreement that these will meet with the code. A couple of things though, these elevations don't waive any of the requirements of the development agreement. So if we find that, and I'll mention this on the record out in the meeting as well, if we find that one of these elevations doesn't happen to meet our requirement in the development agreement for the size of the covered porches, they still have to meet that, so we'll make sure, the applicant's aware of that, we'll make sure that's mentioned on the record, part of the development agreement. They've also got the townhomes, these are the typical townhome elevations, those have not been asked to be modified, those are just included for your information. Yes,
Zach, I had a question.
did you have a question, Zach? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious, was it just aesthetics that you think are better with the new?
From staff standpoint, yeah, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? You can kind of see, they had maybe a little bit more, I think they were trying to be a little more, they were trying to work some flexibility into this development agreement before. You can see there's quite a variety of styles here.
Yeah.
They've consolidated that into something that seems more consistent to us. Trying to get that consistent design look for the subdivision. So,
But
I was just saying,
I like the other ones better.
it's all in the eye of the
interesting
beholder.
though, in the document though, didn't they say that you could only have, you couldn't have two of them, there had to be 5 homes apart for design? Is that right?
Yeah, you have to have, there has to be variety in design, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't have the same house next to each other.
One of the other things that often happens is you'll have a developer that'll get these approved, they'll have a building that'll have a certain design that they want to put out in that subdivision, so we anticipate that's what's happened here.
Come on over.
I like the first ones better.
Is this, so are they additional or they're replacing the first?
They, our understanding, and you can clarify that with the applicant, but our understanding is they want to replace those original.
So you're saying
Now, I
they
will
have
say
a new
this.
developer then, possibly?
Potentially a new builder.
Builders, yeah.
Well, these homes are different, the other homes are all the same. I mean, they look a little different, but they're, the inside and all that would be just.
Right. Personally, I like that.
I will say this, council, that you are, that piece of this is at your discretion. This is a development agreement. If you like the other one's better, you let the applicant know, frankly, so. We went through this development in quite a bit of detail the first time. That's all I planned to present. We were happy to talk, answer additional questions if you have any.
I do have a few questions. I'm trying to find the exact page and I can't find it, but there was talk about the 36 single-family homes and then the 15 townhomes because of the decrease in size. But then I think I remember somewhere later that it mentioned something about 30 units, 30 single-family units, and I don't know.
Maybe the 30% that you were reading, there's a 30% cap, it's in there, isn't there?
It was different from that.
It might be from below.
You know, it was different
part of
from
the-
30%.
Townhomes are allowed to be, 30%.
It was probably on the brick masonry, because I think that was described there too.
Yeah, if you get a page number or
I'll
something.
find it. I might bring that up out there when I can find it, but I just had a question about that. And then, this is a PRUD, and we have specific landscape requirements for PRUDs, right?
So the landscape requirements are those that are found in our code for the water-wise landscaping, we'll have to meet that.
So on their development plan, I saw on the single-family homes that the landscaping is supposed to be left up to the homeowner, or supposed to be carried out or installed by the homeowner. So will those requirements be passed on to the homeowners because this is a PRUD?
So under the development agreement, that's required by the developer to install that landscaping. So I don't know if on the plan it says something different on the notes,
It
but
does on the lots where it shows the different lots.
yeah.
It has landscaping by homeowners.
That's a pretty typical landscape, landscape plan note, it's probably a generic note that landscape architect put on there, but the development agreement supersedes that. Oops, sorry.
Okay,
Well,
yeah,
this-
it says individual lots to be landscaped by, oh, it does say by builder homeowner.
Yeah.
I must have misread that. Got it.
But all the front, in order to occupy the front
Front
landscape
landscaping
has to be
done,
yeah.
yeah.
Because I remember
Meet that
that.
xeriscape standard, yeah.
And then my last question on the elevation, and there are some options that show a third car garage. And in something I read, it said that these were gonna be 2-car garage units. Do you know anything about that?
There,
Will be the option.
if they can have a third car, if they can make a third car garage work with the grading plans, that's fine. What we've seen on most of these lots, because of the grading, that's gonna be very difficult to get that third car garage. There are a few of the larger lots they could probably swing that on, but most of these lots are small enough that a 3-car garage is gonna be a difficult, thing, and they're aware of that. Just, the grading plan is so specific because of these grading constraints that they really are just gonna build to that grading plan they've submitted. That's,
So they're just putting it here because it could be an option based on the lot size.
Could be an
and
option based on the
agreement
lot size.
For a particular lot. But generally speaking, these are gonna be those smaller homes that have just enough space for a 2-car garage.
unless they come up with a creative way to do that 3rd car, but it's gonna be very hard, yeah. But mostly based on the grading issues that are up there.
Those are my questions, thanks.
On your first thing where you showed the area, and then you had a square reservoir
Existing home?
pond. Are they required, somebody required to make sure there's a fence there? I know there is one now, but I mean to be kept up.
The developer's not required to install.
No, he's not, because that's not his property.
Yeah.
But is someone, because when you put
Part of the water.
all those homes and all those other, you got a bunch of kids running around. And I remember when I used to be a kid, every now and then I might have
You hop the fence anyway.
brushed the wall a little bit.
That's in the amount.
But my concern is the safety aspect of it.
The water district is gonna maintain a fence around that because of that same reason. They don't want
Oh,
to
okay.
liability that, so.
Okay, that's all I need to hear.
How did this work with us passing an ordinance, rezoning this, and then having the applicant just say, one of them say, we just don't want to do it anymore?
So we've withdrawn that complete application. That's a very good clarification. The title for this item said amendment to development agreement. In reality, this is a whole new development agreement. That previous development agreement was never signed, was never entered into. So we got to that point, the one property owner said, I'm out. So that development agreement simply can't work because it was based on that other property description. So this is a new development agreement that we're looking at tonight. And so that amendment is a little bit misleading. We are amending what we previously looked at, but it's a new development agreement.
What about the zone change?
The zone change was dependent on that development
So
agreement
the
being
development
signed.
agreement is the condition before
Yeah.
the zone change.
Yeah, in the development agreement, you'll note that there's city undertakings and developer undertakings. They're required to effectuate that development agreement for that zone change to become
Okay,
a reality, so.
that makes sense, thank you.
Do you expect the developer to be here for the public hearing tonight?
Yeah, we do.
So we can ask
Representative,
questions of them then.
yeah.
Oh, and I found one of those. It's on page 3 of the article, or page 3 of the development agreement. And it is 4.7, issuance of building permit. City will issue permits and or occupancy permit in approved phases of the subdivision up to a total of 30 units of the total 51 that could be approved under the subdivision approval.
Yeah.
So I just didn't understand the
So
difference between that 30 and the 36.
It's an amenity requirement. So what we found with, and it actually started with the park, PRED, was that you get to a certain point, you have enough residents there that you actually need to have those amenities in place. At some point, the people who are living there need to have an amenity in place. So we've routinely now included a requirement, we base it on a percentage, that when they get to a certain percentage of units, that amenity has to go in. So that those residents that are living there can actually use those amenities. So that's what that's referring to.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
There was some discussion, I remember previously, because Clinton and I were just reviewing the old reports that we had made, so we could refresh to the previous one, and you said that it had a outlet on the, I guess that would be the south side.
There was a utility outlet and like a future street easement in that area, yeah.
And some of the discussion I remember was some of the residents felt that 3195 or 3175 in Jacobs.
Yeah, the
up
north.
there,
Up here?
Yeah.
that was, I guess, insufficient access.
Would add too much
Yeah.
traffic to Boulder.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And so, is there any concern that with this being smaller in size and having the number of outlets, that it would potentially exacerbate what the residents might be worried about up there?
We heard that concern before. This was something that was reviewed very closely by the city engineer. This is a street that can carry this much traffic. Is designed for that. That's the first point. Second point is, it is very unlikely on an everyday basis that people are going to use that street to exit this subdivision. It would have to be up, especially during the wintertime. You're an uphill grade to get there. So likely your traffic pattern is gonna be predominantly down and out through this. Now, eventually there'll still be a connection through this property when it develops. You've got some good turnarounds there. This would be, you will have some people use it, no doubt, especially if you're up here in this area.
Yeah.
But, that road is designed to carry that kind of traffic. There's no concerns from a traffic standpoint. We understand it's gonna be more additional cars that people haven't seen up there before, but the city engineer has said, their anticipation, all of these units, none of these units are gonna come up here to get out of the subdivision. They're gonna come down here. Most of these units will be the same. You might have a few up here. For emergency access, plenty of room. So this is something that, that they've got the 2 access points. It's designed to carry vehicles, so it's fine. Yeah. That could come up. We didn't have a lot of folks show up to the second round of this development, but that could come up tonight if folks are here.
Let's say some of those homes on 1375 might even choose to go through this development.
I would think that would probably be more
Yeah.
the case. Because in both ways, it's a little bit circuitous to get out to the Valley View. I think, you could. I think when this connection goes in eventually, that'll definitely be the case. That'll be a straight shot out.
For sure.
I think we had questions about water before, with all that, water shares, all that's taken care of.
Yeah, that's included in, both the development agreement and just, development requirements, they'll have to provide water shares and things.
I'm gonna ask, that area which you're not allowing to build on, is that gonna create a problem to the homes that border it? With water, because water's gonna come off that. I assume it's on a hill.
They're gonna have to handle some of that drainage, along those property lines. This is not, it won't be developed, so it's gonna be kind of a historic sheet flow off of that area. Part of the problem is there's some steepness issues here, but there's also some fault issues up there, so that's the reason they couldn't build it. There's some faults running through the area. So it's not maybe as steep as some of these other sensitive lands areas you look at, but there will be some water.
Water, it doesn't matter if it's 1% or 50.
You're right, they'll have to do something to address that along those property lines, but.
Is that required? When you say they, are you talking the developer or the homeowner?
At the time of creating that whole subdivision, not to address that, yeah. So this one's, it's a good question, Zach, because this one's unique because of the geologic issues. We've been very specific in our development agreement. That grading that has to occur at the subdivision level, that's what they have to do. They have to get these prepared for building. You can't do it otherwise. Otherwise, if you come in with some other grading plan, you're gonna be removing walls that need to be there to make this work. You're gonna be removing grading that's occurred, swales. So we spent a lot of time on this. I think the applicant would tell you, they would feel like maybe too much time. We don't feel too much time. It was very, very detailed review of this, so.
It's only takes one.
What about, and I know that they don't have to do it according to state statute, but back to the water issue, what about asking the developer to put any type of
There's land drains.
land drains?
Yeah, this one has land drains.
Okay,
yeah, because
thank
of the
you.
issues, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can see where this is one of those, you preempt and do it.
Yeah. Any other
Is that it?
questions? That's it for me.
We good?
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes.
One more minute.
Absolutely, since we have it.
I knew there was gonna be something I would forget, because I stuck this inside the book, but I'm required to get it on the minutes. So I discussed with you the fraud risk assessment. I put it out in the Dropbox. So now it's on the minutes, that we talked about it, but we're able to check all the boxes on the basic separation of duties, and so that gives us a certain score on here. This comes from the state auditor's office. We follow in a rank of very low risk based on the boxes that we can check. And so if you end up having any questions on that, you can let me know. There was one that I emailed everybody about, going through the municipal elected officials training. If you happen to have gone through that, let me know. I know I got a response from a couple, but anyway, that'll help us check another box. Not that it'll improve our risk level any, but it's probably good to check all of them that we can.
It will, it'll make us very low.
I said it was low, but we're actually very low.
Yeah, one of the best.
You're right.
Best.
And I think we've all done the training.
Who didn't send in the picture? That's what we did. Why would
So
we-
Thank you.
You should be able
Thank
to
you.
check that one off.
Okay.
Hoping Gary didn't take those certificates with him.
I know, that
Is
was
it
me, I was like, oh, am I gonna find that?
It was strange how I found them this morning.
Just
Totally
in
by
time.
chance.
I got on the website, and I don't know.
Yeah,
You know I did.
I had to send mine,
Yeah.
you know, so I had to say.
yeah, I showed you that.
Well, what was very interesting, Clint showed me was all the other information he had about you guys in his files. We taken care of ours, so don't worry. All right. Yes, there's,
That's some work product there.
I'm not worried because I showed him my file. Yeah, so he said, oh.
there's no surprises in yours, Dave, so, you know, it was less than we expected. So we-
No, that's good. Appreciate everybody doing that training too. So that means that we did not have to cover it now today. So we had the 1, 2, 3 of them that would have had to have taken place.
Yes, and I like to typically do it in January just to get it done for the year, so we'll plan on doing it
In January?
again, so
Okay, that's all right.
then we'll be done for 2024.
As long as you do it all in one meeting like you've got it planned
Yeah,
here.
that's the plan.
All right, sounds good. Okay, anything else? If not, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn. Give us a quick time to have a stretch break.
You have a report.
We kind of, no, I think I pretty much updated you guys yesterday on what I've been doing. Yeah, and the only other thing was just, you know, get together to do our lights, which we discussed.
Lights, that is
So, anyway, thank
I
you.
move we
Thanks.
adjourn. We have to do that.
Okay. That would have been second. Okay, thank you.
I saw lights and I thought, yep, it's the lights on my phone.
Oh, today?
Yeah, and it's just on, yeah, let me start.
month of December, it will be Councilmember Bloxham who will be conducting that for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If everyone want to rise with me, and we're going to say the pledge, and then I will follow it up with a prayer. So repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to meet together as a city council and as members of the community to be able to discuss the issues that affect our city that we live in. We are grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy, and we're grateful to be able to meet together in peace and to be able to have this Christmas season to remember all that we've been given. We ask you to have thy spirit to be with us as we go about making decisions and deliberating and discussing the items that we have on our agenda today, and help us to be inspired to do the things that are the best for our citizens. We are grateful for all that we have, and we ask a special blessing on all those members of our community who are struggling, that they may be blessed, and that those who work for the city can be protected and blessed as they go about doing their work to help our city be the best it can be. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, tonight we have 2 sets of minutes that need to be approved. So council, hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at the minutes and make sure you're fine with them as written. If so, I'd look for a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes of the Layton City Council work meeting from November 16th, 2023, and the minutes of the Layton City Council meeting from November 16th, 2023.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved and second that we accept the minutes as written. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll go down to our municipal announcements or events. So council, I know a couple of you sit on some boards. Is there any announcements you'd like to share at this time?
Parks and Recreation, it's a happy time of year. The Parks Department works very hard planning our lights before Christmas. It's been open for a week and a half now, so very excited to continue that. 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. out here in Constitution Circle. We've heard from Santa that he sent one of his elves to hang out with us. And I think he has magical powers of some kind and moves every night. So bring the kids out, have them find the elf that's hiding among the lights each night. And please don't touch him, though. I think he loses his powers. So, and also the Rotarians have the train out and giving train rides from 6 to 8:30 p.m. Maybe if you tip your engineer, he might drive a little later than 8:30 p.m. He's asleep. You can purchase a ticket to ride on the train, $2 per ticket. You can buy them at the hot chocolate stand, which the Rotarians are also selling, and or buy the train in the surf and swim parking lot. So come out and enjoy the lights.
Very good.
So I just want to give a shout out to Davis Arts Council for putting on their Christmas or holiday Active Pages event. It ended the end of November, and they did a Christmas carol out here in the Commons area, and it was a really fun activity, free, and we got to participate in the Rotarian hot chocolate, which was amazing, as usual. One announcement I want to give out is really for upcoming in January. The Layton Communities That Care, in conjunction with Davis Behavioral Health, is going to be sponsoring Learning to Breathe sessions for adults.
These sessions have been going on in the sixth grade classrooms in the public schools in a number of schools in our city already, but they are offering these classes for adults. And these are ways to help increase stress management skills, reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression, which we know a lot of people face, not just during this time of the year, but throughout the year. And so they'll be offering daytime classes from 10:30 to 11:45 and also evening classes from 7 to 8:15 p.m. Those will begin January, February, and March. So if you or someone you know is interested, you can go to the Davis Behavioral Health website, which is www.dbhutah.org, and you can find access to sign up for those classes, and those are free as well.
Okay, that's very good information and very valuable courses too. Okay, anyone else? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and move down to our citizens' comment portion. This portion of our meeting is for anyone in the audience that wish to address the council on any of the items that are not listed here in the public hearing. You're welcome to step up to either side of the dais here and state your name and address for the records.
Good evening, Mayor Petro, City Council. My name is Matt O'Toole. I live at 1674 East, 2400 North here in Layton. This is my wife, Gina. We're both lifelong residents of Layton City. Our purpose in coming here tonight is to request a stop put to occupancy of a residence that's being constructed next to our home. And we're requesting that they not be granted occupancy or final approval. This residence is owned by Jonathan and Carlene Crampton. It's in the subdivision of Quell Hollow, Lot 12, until our property is made whole. We live next to this property. And we've recently found out that they are seeking this final inspection and occupancy, which is imminent. They were out there this week to give that final approval. When our home was originally constructed 17 years ago, we built that with the grade sloping away from our house as we live on a hill, and that slope and grade has been affected by the spoils, the excavation spoils of that construction next to us. It's all been dumped on our property, and that dirt was supposed to have been removed. We still have approximately 50 cubic yards of their dirt and gravel piled on our property, and the slope and grade of that property is now sloping towards our home, where it was originally sloping away from us. And where we live on a hill, we can't have this. We can't have water sloping towards our house. I think we're all aware of some of the city issues with homes on a hill in this area, and we contacted Gary Crane back in 2020. This construction's been going on since then, and we asked at that time for this to be stopped. When we asked for it to be stopped, it was halted for a brief time, and we were supposed to have been made whole at that time. However, the work did resume, and nothing has been done to repair us up until this point. So. We've had 3 years to get this resolved. The homeowner has not done anything, and repeated attempts to work with the city inspectors, and all those involved, our interests have been disregarded with multiple attempts. And so we're formally asking the city council to please put a stop to this, not allow them to occupy their home, which they have been living in for at least a couple of weeks now, which we believe is without an occupancy permit. And we request that this to be stopped until we are made whole.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that.
So, and we need this done as soon as possible, as we believe that they could possibly be granted occupancy and final inspection as early as tomorrow. They've been working on the property, doing other things that we know that the inspectors have asked them to do. However, our situation has not been rectified.
Okay, can you do me a favor? Can you give Kim, our recorder, your phone number so that we can have follow up on this immediately?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there anyone else that wishes to address the council at this time? Okay, Okay, if not, then we'll go ahead and move down to our consent items tonight. The consent items are generally a list of items that we can act on in a single motion. And we have 4 of them on here tonight. So with that, we'll go ahead and move down to our first item, which is our financial and audit report for the year end June 30th of 2023. And our Finance Director, Mr. Tracy Probert, will be presenting.
Mayor, members of the council, tonight I bring to you for your acceptance, the annual comprehensive financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2023. The Finance Department, as well as many other departments in the city, most likely yourselves, have been under audit for the last few months, as we do annually, as required by the state. Inside the report, there are a number of sections that might be of interest to the citizens. The most likely would start on page 11, which is management's discussion and analysis. In that, there's a summary over several pages of all of the financial happenings of the city. And so if someone wanted to read, about a 10-page summary of what this 160-page book has in it, that would be a great place to go. Also, towards the back of the document, there's a statistical section, and what that does is compare the financials of the city most of the time over a 10-year period within each of those charts. And so that's also another area for yourselves and members of the community to go and look without having to dive into, the details, the weeds basically of each individual financial statement. I'm happy to report that the city finds itself as of June 30th in an excellent financial condition, revenues being strong. We also know that there's been inflationary pressures that continue up until now, although those may be easing slightly. And so, again, all in all, excellent financial condition across all funds, including the utility funds. And I'd like to take a moment now just to turn some time over to your auditor, Mr. Robert Wood from HBME, and he will present his audit reports.
Pleasure to be with all of you tonight. Here to report, as we talked about in our work session. I'll just review the reports real briefly and then answer any questions that people may have. We issue 3 reports. The first one is an independent auditor report found in the front section of the book. This is the one that any of your financial statement users are looking for. It's an unmodified opinion. We don't feel there's any material misstatements in any of the financial information presented, as well as your governmental activities, your business type activities, each of your major funds, and then your aggregate remaining fund information. So those schedules that are shown in the book. We also give a in relation to opinion on your combining information, which would be your non-major governmental and non-major proprietary fund. We feel those schedules are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Best opinion I can give your agency as an independent auditor and my firm. The last 2 reports are found in the back of the book. They're 2 compliance reports. The first one is required by governmental auditing standards, and that covers your internal controls over financial reporting, your compliance with grants, laws, contracts, agreements, and so forth, whether it be from the federal, state, or local level. Happy to report that we have no reportable material weaknesses and we have no reportable significant deficiencies in either of those reports. It's not really an opinion. We just didn't find any discrepancies as we went through the audit. We feel that the procedures, the controls, and separation of duties that you have as a city are well designed and well implemented. The last report is required by the state auditor's office. It's on their state compliance audit guide. There's 2 sections to that. There's a section that we need to cover everything annually. That would be like your fund balance adoption, your governmental fees, your fraud risk assessment, which you just heard, information to that nature, also your fund balance and your general fund, maintaining that between 5 to 35%. The second portion of that is stuff that we can rotate on a 3-year basis. Some of that might be your cash management reports that you file twice a year, your enrollment of individuals in the Utah retirement systems, and so forth. So we select a handful. Those are identified in the booklet. We do have 3 findings in reference to those. The first one is your general fund balance. The state requires in your general fund that anything in your assigned unassigned and committed general fund balance has to be between 5 to 35%. When you do the calculation to your current revenues in the general fund, that percentage this year came out to 38%. So if you have to take a finding, this is the best one we can give. Indicates that you have a little bit of extra money because you're just barely over the 35% to spend on some projects. The other two findings that we have is you have a fund. It's a non-major fund. It's called the Victim Services. They really deal with the VOCA grant. That fund this year overspent the final appropriated budget that you set in June by about $4,600. So not really a big amount. That fund will be taken care of by management analyzing that fund this year to make sure the revenues are more the expenditures to cover that slight deficit. It's not that that fund collects anything else. It's really that fund operates just on the VOCA grant for the most part. The final finding that we have is an overage of expenditures in the police department and also in a debt service interest. Now, this isn't to say that the police department went out and spent excess funds. Well, as we talked about in our work session, there was a new accounting standard and one from last year that caught the police, or that's where the expenditures got done because they're renting the building out here that also houses the courthouse from the state of Utah. There was a lease put together on that one, and the new accounting standards require that you recognize the full amount of that lease up front in your general fund, and also as a revenue and also as an expense. That expenditure got reported in the police department for over $1 million. They're only over budget by $486,000 or $448,000, something along that lines. So really, in essence, police department had a savings, but this accounting technicality to follow the requirements that are done, cause them to go over. There's also an interest component of that portion of the lease that doesn't have a budget assigned to it. So really you have an interest expense that doesn't have a budget. So really it's a technicality related to the same issue. Any questions I can answer for you as a council?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to provide this clarification and you can help. You mentioned that we were 38% expended when we should be at 35%.
Yep.
And so we had an extra amount. But I believe in the work meeting, you did say that we have projects that are scheduled to be completed before the end of the fiscal year that will use up that and put us back.
You are
where we need to
correct.
be.
So in fiscal year '24, when you look at what you've already budgeted and what you've appropriated, you've taken that excess and you've assigned it to various projects. So in essence, if things were to stop, you've appropriated the money to where it needs to go on various projects. As Tracy reviewed, as you go through that, I think that brings your percentage from 38% down to about 16 or 17%.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make that clear that there's not just extra money lying around that we can do things with. It's
That'd be
just
nice,
the
wouldn't it?
timing of when these audits and budgets have to take place. So we are using the money appropriately to help out the residents.
Well said, thank you.
Yep, very good. Mr. Morris, did you have a question?
My question was for Tracy, though. Just that this report will be on the city's website for everyone to review soon. Is that correct?
Should be able to get it on there tomorrow.
It's on the finance tab. It should be there. Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, you're good.
Rob, I had just a comment. Would you mind just explaining, maybe for the residents who are here or watching, just who you represent, like what your role is and why, I guess, what we as a council, you can speak for us, what we're trying to accomplish by having you come in and do this?
So I work for an independent local CPA firm in Bountiful. It's called HBME. We've been in business for over 43 years. One of the specialties our firm has is auditing of governmental entities, especially during this time of year. Right now, we are auditing in upwards of 14 municipalities along the Wasatch Front. We also audit a school district, a county, some special districts, actually 2 counties and some special districts. So we've got great governmental knowledge experience. I started my career at the state auditor's office. So I've got a great background in governmental accounting, which is different when you look at stuff and try and explain that to people like, why do governments do that? It's just the way that the nature rolls. But you as a council hire us as the independent CPA firm. I know one of the things that I taught in there is that, hey, I had a CFO show me a dollar bill and says, what did it say on the back of this? In God we trust. He says, that's right. Everybody else we audit. take pride in what we do as a firm and what I do as an independent auditor to say, I care about what is presented in this book. This isn't my financial statement, this is your financial statement. But looking at it, I don't want anything to be wrong with this book, because as you know, and you probably heard in the corporate or the big sector world and companies that are publicly traded, when things go wrong, it's not only the company that gets sued, the auditor gets sued. So I want to make sure, happy to report that obviously we talked about the Victim Services Fund, but if you look at the rest of your funds, they're in line with what you appropriate for budget. The general fund, we talked about the police and this debt service interest being over. When you look at the general fund in total, they had a $1.5 million savings in expenses alone. So really, we could look and say that was an allocation problem. We didn't overspend. We had an allocation in the wrong department, but the state doesn't allow me to look at it by fund. The other funds they do. General fund, it's by department. So we come in as the independent auditor. We do confirmation with other agencies, state tax commission, county with property taxes, your bond banks that hold the bonds, and all that stuff to make sure that their records are lining up with your records. If there's discrepancies, we obviously review those. And an audit is based on sampling of a lot of material stuff in nature. So we do a lot of expenditure testing, especially when it comes to your capital assets and everything else. There's a lot that goes into an audit, hence the reason it takes 2 to 3 months to put a 160-page book together.
Yeah.
Right.
Appreciate that. And I just, as a council, we're vested with the responsibility to make sure that taxpayer money is being spent. And we are a part-time council where none of us are financial professionals up here, right? We all have our day jobs. And we trust in the staff that we have explicitly. But we go through the hiring of an independent auditor for the reason that we want to make sure that things are done with eyes that don't see us every day or every week or whenever we have our meetings. So it just helps us as a council and as the mayor to be able to know that things are going well. And so we appreciate your work and appreciate the staff's work in doing this because it helps us not just as a council, but we have some members of the community who are on our audit committee, along with the member of the council and the mayor, to talk through these issues and to make sure that we're not missing anything. So we just appreciate that. It helps us be able to go back to the residents and know that we've been doing what we could. So thank you.
Very well said. Thank you.
One more, Mayor, please.
Yep, sure.
Rob, you not only are you auditing the funds and the amounts, but also the internal controls. That's also part of the
Correct.
internal audit. Could you share with us in the audit committee meeting that we had? You talked. We got a brand new city treasurer, and she had some what she did before she couldn't do. Could you tell us that?
As part of the audit process, we're not only looking at the amounts that are reported in each individual fund, the budgets and so forth, and your compliance with those things. We also are required to look at the design and implementation of your internal controls over financial reporting. So that second report that I talked about is specifically designed for that. Do you have segregation of duties, or do you have somebody that does the bank reconciliation who also pays the checks, who also does this? Is that, hey, there's usually 4 chairs that you sit at. If somebody's sitting at 2 or 3 of those chairs, that causes you to have a segregation of duties. So you look and say, we can have those problems, but what mitigating controls do we have? So like when you do a bank reconciliation, it's done by an independent accountant who's not doing the disbursements, but then it's also reviewed by a secondary person. You want to get those controls in place. I've seen it before where and when I worked in the state auditor's office, where somebody had access to do all of those things. Well, when all was said and done, that ended up resulting in a $250,000+ fraud that took place and that's where they just stopped, because he was in a position to do it for over 18 to 20 years. So one of the things that we look at, and you referenced, this was just recently coming up and going through adjustments on this book with Tracy. You just had your city treasurer retire. And the new person who was in the accounting department has moved into that position. Well, some of the stuff that she did in her old job, she discovered, oh yeah, I can go in and change this vendor or add this vendor. Well, she discovered the controls have been changed by IT. Now that you're in this new position, you can't do that anymore. So it was a testimony that the controls in place at the city are functioning how they should be. So we review disbursements, payroll. We meet with the HR department to make sure wages are authorized by department heads, reviewed by the city manager. I know Alex signs off on everybody's wage at the first of the year or fiscal year. So we look at all those aspects. And then if we find any discrepancies, we do either additional testing or we'd be giving you a report to say, hey, we found a deficiency, a significant deficiency, or a material weakness. Happy to report we didn't find any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. There might be some deficiencies here and there, but overall, your city is functioning the way that it should be.
No, it's a very good committee, and I will say that the two citizens that we have sitting on that committee ask some very in-depth and very detailed
Great questions.
questions that, quite honestly, unless you was in that profession, you wouldn't think on that level. So I'm very grateful for their input that they've had.
The thing I'd like to say is you made Trace jump through a few hoops, poor guy, with this big a budget and everything. But now you get the opportunity because your firm is being audited, which is a normal thing. So it's not like we just go out and pick a firm and yeah, you've been around a while and all that stuff, but you're also audited to make sure that you are doing.
Correct. So
the
this
things
coming
for
Tuesday,
us.
I have what we call a peer review. So we have an independent CPA firm that comes in and does a sample on all the audits that we issue based on industry. So government, single audit, corporate, nonprofit, 401k, anything that our firm does, they would select a sample of our engagements and go through to make sure we're not only planning, we're conducting, and we're properly reporting in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and auditing standards, whether that be on the FASB side or the GASB side, making sure we're following and doing what we could. If we don't pass that, it could prohibit our firm from performing these audits, and we undergo that every 3 years, required.
All right, thank you. We really
Thank you.
appreciate the report by both you folks. So thanks. Okay, let's go on to item number B, which is an appointment of the member to the Wasatch Integrated Waste Management District, Resolution 23-56.
Madam Mayor, I would ask that we make a motion that we take resolutions 23-56 and 23-57 as and considered separately.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, knowing that, let's go ahead and go down to item D then, which is an annexation request on the Barney property. So Mr. Chad Wilkinson will be presenting that information to us.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is the beginning of an annexation process. As you know, with previous annexation requests, we have a first step, which is this acceptance and certification process. This is the process that is what starts our noticing requirements from state law. We have a very lengthy noticing requirements for annexation requests. So this particular process, should these resolutions be approved by the council, would begin that annexation process. This is an aerial photo of where that property is located, about 3049 West Gentile. You can see this kind of red outline around the property. As we've gone through this review, we were notified by the county that there is a discrepancy between the county's description of these properties and the city's descriptions of these properties. What that amounts to is there's about a 13-foot wide strip in this area that there is a discrepancy between what the city's records for that particular property show and the county's. This area, per the county's records, is still outside the city limits. I think that was probably news to the property owners as well as the city. So we're making that as part of this particular action tonight, just making you aware. This will be reflected. We'll reconcile this, whatever that case may be. That'll be reflected in the public notices that are sent out. That correct description, whatever that may be, will be reconciled and sent out as part of the public noticing for this particular item and this action. So tonight, your action would be to accept. Oh, one more thing to note on that discrepancy: this property is all commonly owned, so everything is owned by that same property owner. So that discrepancy is between property that's owned by that same group, the same family. So with that, we are recommending that the council approve the resolution certifying the annexation and accepting that annexation petition so that we can begin this process. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions on this? Lisa.
So the way I understood it in the packet, this will be added to the Jenkins PRUD. Is that right? Is it, I don't know if it's a PRUD, but the Jenkins development to the west?
Not all. So there is a chance that this parcel at the, this portion of this parcel would be added to that. The remainder of the parcel would be subject to a separate subdivision application on the north.
Right, that's the south part. That's what I meant.
A
So-
portion, a portion of that south, but part of this would not, we don't anticipate would be added to that. It would remain.
That wasn't part of that development when it went through the process, though?
No, it's not.
So
So
we would expect a.
it would require its
amendment.
own amendment to make that happen. That's right.
All right.
The discrepancy piece. So,
Was there another question? Okay.
no, they were just asking that there is actually a home on there and then a shop in the back. is
Yes,
what it boils
there's a
down
couple
to.
outbuildings back there. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions, council?
Thank you.
All right. Okay, that concludes the two consent items that we want to act on in a single motion. So council, I'll bring it back to you for action.
Madam Mayor, I move that we accept the financial and audit report for the year end June 30, 2023, and also the annexation request for the Barney property, resolutions 23-53 and 23-54.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we accept both items A and B and the resolutions as stated. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That takes care of the two consent items. Now we'll go back to item B and C.
Madam Mayor, I'd move that we continue these two issues with some instruction to legal to review the council's role and in the, I guess, the granting authority for boards that we as a council appoint, whether they're governmental or whether they're quasi-governmental, that legal can look to see about what our roles and responsibilities are as considered with the individual who's on the board and actions taken by board members, and if there are checks and balances or if it's simply in the advice and consent that the council gives when the board member is appointed. And to have that continue to our next meeting, which is December 21st, 2023.
Okay. Somebody second
I'll
that?
second.
Okay. Okay, council, are you in agreement with this, that we postpone these two items until the next meeting? If so,
Individual, yeah. Yes, aye.
okay. Okay, there you have it. We'll go ahead and postpone items B and C until our next scheduled meeting. So now we'll go down to our public hearing portion of our meeting, which is, we have two items on here, and what we'll do is go ahead and have the information presented, and then we'll open up the public hearing for comment. So the first item, actually, Mr. Wilkinson will be presenting both items to us tonight. So the first one is a rezone request for the DePrizio rezone. So, Chad?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The first item is a rezone request for some property located about 1650 West Gentile. The request is to rezone the property from PB, professional business, to RS, residential suburban. A number of years ago, this property came before the council as a request to rezone this property from residential to a PB zone in anticipation of some commercial use on the property. The property owner has determined that they would like to try to market this back as a residential property instead of a commercial property. So this request would take it back to that residential suburban designation. That is supported by the general plan for that particular property. So this just gives you an idea. There is an existing structure there on the property, existing home. Here's Gentile Street there on the south of the property. You've got 1625 there on the east side of that property. Some of those nursery uses there on the south side of Gentile. So with that, this was reviewed by the Planning Commission, and they are forwarding a recommendation of approval for this zone change, and we would also echo that recommendation.
Council, do you have any questions regarding this rezone? Councilman Thomas, do you have a question there?
Yeah, there we go. Chad,
Yes, sir.
Right now, it's, I don't know what to call it, commercial.
PB, professional business?
Yeah, professional business, right? So they're going to have to go in there and do some, I would assume, have to go in there and kind of do some remodeling.
Potentially, I'm not sure how much remodeling they've
Okay.
done during that time. There could be some work that needs to be done to bring that back to residential
May
standards.
not.
May not, yeah.
Okay.
Some of that, sometimes the commercial standards are even more rigorous than the residential standards in relation to things like, restrooms and those kind of things.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
true.
Yep.
But we're going to put people into sleep, which I think they had before, so.
Yeah, if there's been any changes
they're
related
not
to
gonna-
egress,
okay.
ingress, those kind of things will have to be brought back to a residential standard if they've been
Okay.
changed.
So nothing else is going to change there. If they're going to remodel, do they need a business permit?
They'll need potentially a building permit for some
Building,
remodels.
I'm
Yep,
sorry,
yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't the tax base change also from a professional business to a residential? So they'll,
Yeah, and that's that'll be something the Davis County Assessor will figure out. But
Right.
yeah, there will be a change in the tax for that property.
okay. Any other questions?
You weren't here in 2008, neither was I, but what was this spot zoning? This is just like right in the middle of this entire area. Can you give me a history of what that was about?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of our staff around at the time, but those that were indicated that there was a plan at the time for this to become kind of a little office type use there. It's an interesting area, as we've noted before. You've got some, commercial type nursery uses to the south. So at the time, the council felt like that was an appropriate zone change to make. The rules related to spot zoning have been altered, so you can do some of these. I will say that in this particular case, you've got some, you do have residential either side, but there was probably some justification based on the uses to the south to make some of those changes. But yeah, other than that, I think it was just they were comfortable with that proposal, what was being proposed at the time, and now they'd like to go back.
And there's
answer some questions for this? Is that
Hold on.
okay?
Wait until we open up the public hearing.
Okay, sorry.
So in addition to this home, I know there's other homes along that street that are also in the same category. So,
There's a few, yeah. We've got a few on Gentile that were in
We
that
do.
same category, yep.
yeah, so, okay. Any other questions, council? Okay. Typically, why don't we go ahead and open up the public hearing at this time? And then, well, and that way, if anybody would wish to comment on this particular item, we'll take the comments now.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's been moved in second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, there you have it. So anyone in the audience who wishes to address this item, you're welcome to come up to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record, though.
Okay, my name is Deanna Haskett. I live at 1011 South, 2125 West in Syracuse. So I am actually the real estate agent that is selling this property. It is zoned professional business. My client had it rezoned. He used it as a medical office, but it is completely set up as a residence. There is nothing that's been altered inside the property that would make it any way that it could not just be automatically used as a residence. It's a California kind of split entry home. If you know that floor plan, so you walk into a family room and then upstairs is your kitchen, which is still a full kitchen, dining room, 2 bedrooms and a full bathroom, and then in the basement is an extra bedroom, family room, and then it has a 3rd level down that has an additional family room. But there's nothing that needs to be altered in the property that would make it into a residential living space. So.
All right,
If
thank
there's
you.
any other questions that you may have about it. And nothing in the exterior as well has been modified. They did add a ramp for handicap accessibility, but other than that, there's nothing exterior-wise that's been modified that would make it not look like a residential home.
I drive by it often. I know it looks like a residential home. Okay. Anyone else wish to comment on this item? Okay. There's 2 ways we can handle it. We can go ahead and vote on this item and then go on to the second one, which Council Drake, do you have a preference here? I know Gary was,
I would say do it individually.
okay. All All right, then council, I'm going to bring this back to you to take action on item A, the rezone request from a professional business back to a residential.
Madam Mayor, I move that we change the zoning from professional office to residential suburban on ordinance 23-22 on 1650 West Gentile Street.
Okay, it's been moved in second that we accept the rezone request. Let's go ahead and do a roll call, and we'll start down at this end this time. So, Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
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 Aye.
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. It's unanimous. Okay, we still have our public hearing open so that we can go on to item number 2, which again is this time it's a conceptual plan for a development agreement and rezone request for the Folkman Farms. So, Chad, do you mind presenting that information?
Thank you. Mayor, council, this is a revisit of a previously approved application. This is, again, the Folkman Farms Development Agreement Rezone Concept Approval. There's a couple of components to this approval. There'll be an ordinance that approves the proposed zone change should the council decide to approve this, and a resolution that approves a development agreement. Here's the property shown in red, just off of Highway 89, Valley View Drive, about 1608 North Valley View Drive. Get a little bit closer here. Here is the subject property outlined in red. You can see the existing reservoir there that's kind of almost surrounded by the property there. To the south, there's a large Weber Basin aqueduct that runs through the property about in this location. You can see Valley View Drive just over here to the west on the left-hand side of the drawing, Highway 89 there, excuse me, on the extreme left of that drawing. The Gordon interchange is just off the picture here on that southwest corner there. The proposal is to change the zoning from A to R110, from A and R110 to R110 PRUD. The big change that happened since the last time the council reviewed this particular application is that one of the property owners that was involved in the previous application has determined they no longer wanted to go forward with that development. So there's been about 7 acres on the south side of this property that's been removed from the application, which has necessitated a new look at this, a new design of the PRUD. We've worked very closely with the applicant over the last several months to come up with a new design that can still function and meet our PRUD minimum standards. This is the overall design for the subdivision, the proposed PRUD development. You can see that this is where that reservoir is located on that aerial photo. This is where that aqueduct is located, and you can see the road has been designed over the top of that facility. This particular development has a 12% open space requirement, which they've met through some open spaces here, and also some other smaller open spaces throughout the development. There's also some areas on the property that are not developed because they are constrained by slopes or faults or other geotechnical concerns, and those are also going to be left undeveloped as part of this proposal. You can see the road network connects to Valley View Drive here on the northwest portion of the property, and then to the existing street system here on the northeast section of the property. The PRUD ordinance allows up to 30% townhomes. The applicant is proposing that number. There's 15 of the total units, 15 townhomes, 36 single-family residential lots that would be proposed as part of this planned residential unit development. These are just a couple of maybe detailed views of those areas that I just showed. You can kind of see some of the other little smaller open space areas. There's also a trail connection that's proposed that would eventually connect to our Bonneville Shoreline Trail through that development. Go through this fairly quickly. This is just a very close view of those townhome lots that are being proposed. You can see that with the landscape plan also shown a little more detail of those common areas. You can see the common area here labeled as C, another labeled as A, and then B, all kind of centrally located here at that intersection of those two streets. They all meet that requirement for within 900 feet of all the lots within the subdivision so that residents can access those. Again, some of that undevelopable area there to the east shown in that shaded area. One issue that we wanted to talk with the council about, the applicant has requested some substitute elevations from what was originally proposed with the Planning Commission. These are the original elevations that were proposed as part of the development agreement. Here's a couple of those, and then a view of several of those renderings of those elevations. The applicant has requested that we replace those with these elevations as shown on the screen. We have reviewed those elevations as staff and are comfortable with that substitution. It would be made part of that Exhibit D of our development agreement, should the council decide to do that. These elevations, again, are conceptual, and there are a few things that we have noted that on some of these elevations that may not comply with the development agreement condition. If that's the case, the development agreement will take precedence over that. They will have to still meet development agreement requirements related to covered porch size, patio size, et cetera, materials, whatever the development agreement shows. The elevations at this stage are given for context and to give an idea of what will be built. We look for consistency with those elevations as we review the individual preliminary plat application, final plat, and the building permits. As I mentioned, this also includes some townhomes. These are those typical elevations for the townhomes that you can see there as part of Exhibit D. These are some of the details on the amenities that would be constructed as part of the development. You can see a pickleball court, some trails, benches, the pergola there, so a playground that will be constructed as part of the development. I'm going to go back to that overall plan so we can look at that again. So in terms of, again, the open space requirement has been found to meet the minimum open space for this area. There will be a requirement for those amenities to be built at a certain stage in the development along with the construction of the homes. This particular development went through a very extensive review of the geotechnical studies. There are requirements in the development agreement that stipulate that the grading for this entire subdivision as well as individual lots have to be addressed as part of the overall grading for the subdivision. So that's going to be part of the preliminary plat and final plat review process, and then ongoing review by city staff as they implement this plan on site. Because of the nature of these lots and the sensitive land natures of these lots, there are very specific requirements that have been applied to this and that will have to be complied with through the remainder of the stages of development. This was reviewed again by the Planning Commission in a previous meeting. They are forwarding a recommendation of approval for Resolution 23-46, approving this. Just as clarification, in the agenda it says amended development agreement. We certainly have amended the previous development agreement that was proposed. However, I will note that this is a new development agreement. The previous development agreement, because of the change of the other property owner and pulling out of the development, that has been modified. So this constitutes a new development agreement. The other development agreement was never effectuated. So we are recommending you approve the development agreement per Resolution 23-46 and the Ordinance 23-21, modifying the zoning from A and R110 to R110 PRUD. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
Okay, council, do you have any additional questions? I know we went over this in the work meeting as well, but I'm sure you've thought of more.
Just if Chad, if you could talk about the landscaping, the PRUD.
Yeah, landscaping standards are required the landscaping standards for a PRUD are required to be water-wise landscaping standards. The particular development agreement for this development requires that the front yards be installed by the developer of the subdivision for those single-family homes and the townhomes. So that landscaping will be implemented with water-wise standards prior to certificate of occupancy for the homes.
Okay, any additional questions?
Can you maybe give me some background on when we make a zone change and R110 fits and then one of these is actually already R110. What's the purpose behind allowing a PRUD as opposed to just a straight R110?
This is really one of those kind of classic cases for a PRUD because there are constraints. So it allows a developer to come in and have some flexibility on lot sizes, on clustering of homes to avoid those sensitive lands areas. So this has been designed in a way to avoid the most sensitive land portions of those lots. There are some, like I said in the work meeting, there are some slope constraints as well as fault constraints on this property. So this allows that developer to come in, cluster those homes, make them a little bit smaller, protect those slope areas so that there are that gives the ability to still get some development potential out of there while protecting those sloped areas.
Can you speak to the east side of the property about the potential that those homes that are where the undevelopable portion of it is. You talk about what the development agreement is doing to protect those homeowners from potentially having water issues.
Yeah, they'll have to submit as part of the preliminary and final plans for this subdivision. They'll need to submit even more detailed. This is a fairly detailed drainage and grading plan, but more detailed plans that will, include things like swales and things that will take that water and remove it from those areas. There'll be some retaining walls also that will have. Most likely, it's going to depend on the design, but most likely some type of a drain system installed that will take that water away from those areas to protect the walls as well as those properties.
Okay. And that, I mean, is that notated on the deeds, or is that simply something as part of the development agreement that's just require the developer to go through that to ensure compliance?
This development, because of like all those sensitive land issues that and the experience we've had with other similar developments, there are requirements for all of the grading to be completed by that master developer of the subdivision. Those individual lot grading areas will have to be established, the walls, those types of things. And then there are not only in the development agreement, but there are also disclosures that have to be recorded so those individual property owners understand that there are improvements that have been made on those lots that if they should modify will have an impact on their lots. So in other words, if we have a wall or a drainage structure that's providing protection for that home and an individual property owner goes up and modifies the landscaping that could potentially modify those structures, there will be disclosures before certificate of occupancy required so that folks know that the things that they do on those lots could have an impact on the overall grading design for that development.
Thank you. That was my question, mostly that some homeowner, newlywed couple or something that never bought a house before, has no history buying a house, that they would have some sort of notice of some kind that this has been passed, you're getting your occupancy right now because the grading is properly done. If you do X, Y, or Z, you could potentially put yourself and your home at risk. The last question I had was, you mentioned that there was some fault lines also in that area. Are those addressed in disclosures as well? Or is that just like you're building next to a mountain and there potentially could be geological features that go about building that close to the mountain?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up in the development agreement. The fault areas have been avoided with these developments, so they're certainly there. Along with many of our homes here along the Wasatch Front, there's faults there, but I would have to look. I can look that up for you in the development agreement. I'm not sure to the extent that we identify the faults, but there certainly is a notice that this is in a geological area that's a sensitive lands area that has those types of issues that have been identified. There's faults, there's some of the soils that are just not appropriate for development, those kind of things.
Okay, thanks, Chad.
Little clarification for me, if you could. So we've got a concept plan, a development agreement, and a rezone. You said some of this is informational for us, like the elevations. What exactly are we approving with the resolution and the ordinance, and what will come back to us in the future or to the Planning Commission?
So it's the concept plan, which is what you see before you. There will be more details on a preliminary plat that will be submitted subsequent to this. That preliminary plat would include the more detailed utility drawings, a more detailed. This is quite a detailed grading plan, but even more detail if we need that to designate where that individual lot grading would occur for these individual homes. A little more detail on, potentially on. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. On the drainage issues that we talked about, the land drains, those kind of things. So this tonight is the zoning, the concept plan, and the development agreement. This development agreement's been written with maybe more detail than normal on those grading and drainage issues so that those are addressed specifically at preliminary and final plat as we move forward to make sure that, again, because this is the grading and drainage for this development are going to operate kind of as a system. It's got to be designed that way and it's got to be implemented that way. So, yeah, so this will come back for a preliminary review and to the council and then back to the planning or the city staff for final.
Okay, thank you.
So this is kind of a silly question, but knowing that you've got that far east side that's non-developable, and that's where the concern is with the drainage, And typically on the development, you have to maintain your water in your area, or in the case of a resident, on their residential property. So when they bring back that design, then they have to make sure that all the runoff stays within this area? Or how
On
does that
hillsides,
work? Because this is a hillside. I know you can't control it.
Right, on hillsides, the focus, you're always going to have water coming down a hill.
Yes.
Water runs downhill, right? But so in this case, what you're looking at is protecting those lots. They will have some type of conveyance that will be required to get it, away from those tops of those slopes to a appropriate storm drain
Detention.
facility. Whether that's that's part of that grading and drainage plan, but whether that's a waterway that takes it to a storm drain someplace else on site, whatever the case may be, there will be appropriate conveyance measures for that concentrated flow. That being said, there's going to be sheet flows that come across these slope properties. That's just how, when you get water on top of a property, you're going to have some sheet flow. They'll have to address that. It's in their interest to address those areas along those property lines to protect any grading that they do for those lots and those homes. So.
Okay, very good. Okay, council, do you have any other questions?
I have a couple of questions just about the elevation. I don't know if the developer is here or not, but I just have questions as to the decision to change from the original options of elevations to the newer options, and then also about the amenities. I read in the agreement that the amenities are for that property or for that development community, but that will also include public portion for the trail system. So how the homeowners or the HOA or, how they plan to mitigate that when you have public access to a trail, but then they're going to have a couple pickleball courts and, some other amenities, how the residents will understand what that dynamic may look like in a city of this size, where there may be people who are there for other public trail type options. So I just have those.
Yeah, great question. There is a representative of the developer here tonight, so, yep.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll go ahead and open it up for anybody to make public comment. No? Okay. So it looks like the developer's on his way up, so we'll be happy to hear your answer.
Mayor and council members, thank you so much for taking the time. Before I get started, I wanted to thank staff for, this has been a long process. I also want to thank the landowner. We have worked on this for several years. And what makes, if you've ever been on the property, it's one of the most beautiful pieces in Layton City. Mm-hmm. And with that beauty also comes challenges. Topography, there are some areas that we have to avoid based on geotechnical issues. There's over 3 acres of land up there to the east that isn't going to be touched and will in many ways be very beautiful the way it's kept. Specifically to answer your questions, some of the elevations that we changed are based on some other developments that we've done, and also to keep in mind with what is moving and what is selling in the market today. And so we wanted to refresh those a little bit. Specific to the amenities, we've actually focused on amenities that I think get used. Pickleball is a pretty popular sport. I think in the Planning Commission, they were more worried about the noise that the pickleball was going to make against the paddle than anything else. But we've centered all of the amenities in kind of an area very close to where the townhomes are, which will kind of isolate that in an area, if that makes sense. In addition, the actual public areas that the city that you're talking about specifically with the trails and such, there probably will be a little bit of people not understanding what's public and what isn't. Those will probably be handled through the HOA with some systems, lock systems on the pickleball courts that are handed out very similar to it. You'd have a key or something if you need to use the pool, and those that will be allowed by the residents themselves. So there's also, we didn't go into detail, but there's family areas near the pickleball courts where they can have a picnic with tables. And then there's also a kind of what we would call a small kids area with some playground equipment and other things. So it should be, there's, I think, over 1.5 miles of trail actually on the site itself, walking area. And we've utilized, as Chad had alluded to, there is an actual aqueduct that goes through that area that is very difficult to design around because there's only certain areas you can actually place a road across. And we've done that very uniquely and then placed a trail right next to it. Very few people even know where it is. Chad pointed it out. He's seen it many times, but no one will even know that even exists. So it's been a very long process, but it's been a very good process where, private development and the city's needs meet, I think, in a very good process over the long haul. So again, the landowners have been very patient, but we've made it through this. So we're very excited about this project.
Okay, before you go on, I should have reminded you to state your name.
Dave Morton.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just have one piggyback on that. If you could go back to the original, so these homes aren't mine, but everything in that D3, D4 zone looks nice.
Yes.
Looks like something that should be over there, just saying.
Thank you. We agree.
Just a quick question for you.
Please.
The trail you just mentioned, the 1.5 miles is that going to be private or is that?
That will
or
be.
Will that be public as well?
Well, there may be portions of that, Chad. Maybe I think probably.
The reason I say that is that where we are in Valley View, we've got a lot of residents that there's no sidewalk. We've talked about this, and a lot of people they like to walk, and if there's going to be a trail in this vicinity, it's going to be used.
Yeah. I specifically know, I think there's a trail that goes down on just west of the townhomes.
The south side of the property.
Yeah.
See if I can find that I think it might be on that landscape plan.
Yeah, see if you can find that. I think it's a 10-foot trail.
That's
You can kind of see that
well,
little.
right?
Just east of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of see that little stub right there. Then this is another one. This is an area that they've designated. It's a wider sidewalk, it's part of a trail system there. So, and then the other trail is up there through that open space area that we described before. You can kind of see the beginnings of it right there. Those are public. Those would all be public.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The ones behind the townhomes may be a little bit less comfortable for the public to access, but all the trails are considered to be public.
Okay. And I noticed in the agreement also that rather than aggregate, it's going to be paved, correct?
Correct. And then there's also, there is a connection into the Bonneville Shoreline Trail there to the east as well that we're putting in, which will be extremely nice for people to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have, Chad, I know we have some senior community areas east of 89. Do we have any townhomes east of 89?
There's a little bit of multifamily I can think of, but I'm not. You may have stumped me on that one. I don't think we do, but I know we've got a little bit of multifamily.
Yeah, I was curious, and that's why I asked the question about the PRUD overlay. I was just curious about the decision about kind of to Councilmember Smith Edmondson's comments about the elevations, about that area east of 89 has a particular feel to it. And I'm just curious if the overlay is something that fits there. So thank you. I was just asking the question.
Yeah, in this case, I think the overlay serves as a way to give some flexibility, and the townhome component is limited for one thing, but it also allows you to have kind of flexibility in housing types to get around that clustering idea as well. They can be clustered even more than a single family home. So this particular design, they've kind of placed those townhomes central to the development as well. So they're not going to be the first thing that folks see as they come from the Valley View Drive into the development. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, one more. When this was discussed last year, we talked a lot about the improvements that had been made to Valley View Drive along the frontage there. I noticed I assume it's the owners, the Folkman home will be staying, is that right?
That is correct.
Will there be any improvements made or needed there in front of that property? Maybe to Chad. I'm just wondering if we're making improvements to the south and the north where the intersection is there going to be an island there without sidewalk or something?
No, well, so we are actually, yes, it's a great question. Very good question. We are making improvements along the section of Valley View that will have sidewalk where we were asked to do that, if that makes sense. So there will be an end to the sidewalk because once we end with our development, and I believe also, Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're burying some power line as well along Valley View as well. It's my understanding.
Yeah, there's going to be some utility work done along that Valley View corridor, but I thought that was addressed in the development agreement. I don't see that language regarding this particular lot, but there will be improvements, of course, here and here as part of that. That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for you on that. If you can give me just a second. I do have an answer for Zach's question about the development agreement that I can get back to, but I need to look at that specific language really quick on that.
I know that was a concern last time, and it was addressed that it would be improved with it, but I'm glad that you brought that up,
yeah.
Councilman Roberts.
And I don't remember. I know this was. I know if we could probably work something out where if somebody could mow the lawn for Stuart, I'm sure that we could work out a sidewalk. Is that right, Stuart? Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
exactly.
Without the dues.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if Chad picked up on that he had agreed to that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I was just trying to find that specific language, but yeah, if that's satisfactory to the council, that's fine with me.
Well, and I believe the developer asked the property owner, and it looked like he was in agreement to go ahead and doing the sidewalk and curb improvements there as well, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Maybe I could just provide that answer to your question, Zach. There is language in the development agreement that states that we talked about that deed restriction. There'll be a disclosure required at the certificate of occupancy stage for the the builder and home buyer. They'll be required for them to sign that specifically references that geotechnical report that says the geotechnical report is on file at the city, that it has recommendations, it has the characteristics described of that property. So that will be a disclosed condition of those properties for those owners.
Okay.
So do we need to, when we do make a motion, do we need to add the amendment to the development
for the
plan for the improvements in front of the Folkman property in addition to the other?
I think that would be appropriate since we've heard that
should.
tonight. And then also if you choose to add those elevations, that would be the other piece we'd want you to consider.
It means you're making the motion.
I heard that.
Okay, council, do you have any other questions before we open it up for the public? If not, I'll go ahead and open it up now. So anyone in the audience or would like to address this particular item, you're welcome to do so. Once again, please state your name and address for the record.
Mayor, Councilman, thanks very much for your service, for all that you're doing, for making this happen. My name is Scott Baker. I live at 3120 Lakeview Circle, so right in that general vicinity. I have a lot of concerns about traffic, whether that's people or whether that's cars. We were just here a couple of weeks ago with the Gordon Town Center, and I think they use like a number of 7,000 extra car trips a day right in that area, which is going to go right across our bridge, across the highway, and going on the on and off ramps, which are going to be out of control, trying to get across that area. And then on Valley View and East Side, people going in different directions. Now, when we add this, that's going to be that many more people that are going to be in that very, very small area. You did mention Valley View, and it is not improved, and it's not wide enough for all this extra traffic. And this, and I appreciate the sidewalk that's going to go right there, but that's only a very small portion of the Folkman property that's right in there. Everything else beyond on both sides of the road is still going to be unimproved unless we, that whole thing is improved. I know I've heard that there's other parts where we're going to add more housing. That's going to add more people. Where are they going to park when they take this public trail that's going to go up to the Bonneville Trail that's on there? I mean, I just see a lot more people. It's very dangerous in front of the coffee shop during a lot of times of day. You can't get around people are stop on the middle of the road and they want to turn left through the drive-through. So now we're going to add a lot more traffic that's trying to go through there. And then, of course, in front of the fire department, which is always a concern when we have, so much traffic. Can't do much about that. But I have concerns about the traffic and all the people that do walk there all day long in the dark, and during the daytime. So just wanted to bring that up. That there's a lot of traffic concerns because all those people are going to go, the majority of them are going to go in front of the coffee shop, in front of the fire department, and they're going to turn across down Gordon, go in the area of where the town center is, and that's going to add that much more traffic to an already overwhelming traffic count that we talked about a couple weeks ago. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, anyone else? Okay, and if there's no other questions, I'll bring it back to the council for action. Or do you have a question?
I just have a thought, because every time I exit off of 89 to get on either Gordon or Oak Hills, we don't have lights there and it's sometimes hard to see. And I'm just wondering if there are plans for improvements in those areas as far as like a light or something that will help mitigate some of these other concerns, because as the gentleman mentioned, there are people who are trying to turn to get onto the freeway, but there are people who are trying to pass the freeway entrance to get into that parking area by the trailheads, and just things of that nature. Are there things like that? And I know Steve's not here, and that may be a question for him, but just those types of things to help with the flow of traffic, because 89's 1,000 times better, but exiting and having to look you have to look both ways anyway, but what I'm saying is you have to pull almost all the way out before you can see who's coming down from the hill before you turn. And so if we have those improvements planned, when we can get those in, because all of that will help with whatever these developments are that are going on the east side of 89.
Yeah, there are some traffic signals. I think that's what you're talking about, traffic signals that are planned for that Gordon area once they meet warrants for those traffic signals. Various locations along Gordon, certainly one there toward that town center. There's a signal that's planned there. I didn't bring those slides, but there are some other signals up and down Gordon that'll hopefully help with some of those issues of related to left turns and even spacing of traffic along there to try to provide some traffic control.
Those traffic lights that they were talking about, the first one was on the west side of the town center, and then they were further west. So they didn't ever talk about anything over the bridge in there, which is, as you were discussing, that's difficult. And when we add all this extra traffic, it's going to be a lot worse. Thank you.
And I don't have that in front of me to say either way on that, but I can tell you that if the warrants are met for signals, those signals will be installed to try to help with those traffics. But we wouldn't put a signal in without that warrant being met. So this particular development is not expected to add that enough traffic to necessarily warrant a signal anywhere. But maybe the cumulative effect of that at some point would warrant something like that, and we could look at that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing and take action on item B of the Folkman Farms. Yep, I think they're waiting on you.
Because I care about the aesthetics. No, that's you. I move that we close the public hearing, and I move that we accept or adopt the resolution 23-46 and ordinance 23-21 for the concept plan, amended development agreement, and rezone request for Folkman Farms, with the addition of the original elevations that were presented prior to what we got tonight.
And the curb and gutter? And the street improvements for the...
And the street improvements in front of the Folkman property.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that we accept the concept plan as presented. We'll start down at the other end with Mr. Thomas.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Go ahead.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. It's unanimous that we accept item B on our public hearing. Okay, council, that brings us down to any unfinished business. If anybody has it, if not, then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. They're waiting on you.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Okay, thank you very much. We thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. And if we don't see you beforehand, enjoy the holidays and enjoy our park out here as well. Thank you.